Sup Frosties? So as more people are starting to get their hands on Frosthaven, some people are asking where's my copy, but everyone's asking what should I play? This question plagues everyone, from people who play MMOs and RPGs and even, fighting games and whatnot. But Frosthaven is no exception. So when it comes down to it, what will you play? Well, I'm here to help you make that decision and give you all the information you need to pick out what your starter is going to be in Frosthaven. Remember to subscribe if you want more Frosthaven content, and if you'd like to support my channel, please visit Patreon. It really helps. The Banner Spear. The Banner Spear is a high-health hybrid melee ranged attacker that is primarily a defender, but could act as a striker, support, or a controller in various different capacities. It excels at a lot of things quite well. From high burst damage with formation attacks, heal and shield your allies from harm and control the battlefield with pushes, pulls, and of course granted movement. The Banner Spear is relatively simple to play, but where they really do excel is those formation attacks. Attacks that require you and an ally to be in specific positions in order for you to execute powerful attacks on enemies. Additionally, you have banners that provide powerful effects to allies, including yourself. The Banner Spear is relatively easy to grasp. If you're new, you could always just pick the easy formation, play the bottom loss that gives you a shield for the whole scenario, drop a banner in the last room, and call it a day. Even if you just do that at the bare minimum, you should be able to play it very effectively without having to worry about juggling too much that's going on. It's effective and low nuance, and even players who struggle to learn new classes might be able to grasp this on the first scenario and handle it pretty well. However, if you do want to specialize in those formations, get allies in specific positions, sometimes multiple allies, to do devastating attacks, you might require a little bit more assistance or control using your own summons to be able to pull off that stuff. So particularly canny players will find the Banner Spear to be quite rewarding. Although if you do really like elements, the Banner Spear has only a minor reliance on the air element, and ultimately it does have a little bit of range, but frankly most of the attacks ends up you have to get fairly close and up and personal to play this class truly effectively. Additionally, you do have a little bit of weakness because several of your attacks are contingent on allies and enemies being in the right spot. Sometimes enemies will draw cards that will completely screw with your plans, so sometimes you have to play things at the right initiative just to be able to make sure they land. And some people just struggle to know which initiative do I need to go at to undercut this attack and or go late enough that if this attack gets drawn, I don't get hosed by it. And sometimes that can be frustrating. And if that's something that you get incredibly frustrated by, there are other options. But if you like to memorize monster cards, push allies in the right position, and surround enemies like a wolf pack and take them down through coordination, this class is going to be immensely rewarding for you. The Inox Drifter. Jack of all trades, master of everything actually, except crowd control. You can build your drifter to whatever you want, and that's amazing. It has several effects that improve various abilities, such as bonus movement, granting retaliate when you're attacked, or increasing the healing or damage of your attacks. They usually are for the next 6 actions of that type, and then they fall off. But you have several cards that allow you to restore the charges of these, so instead of the next 6, it might be 7, 8, 9, or potentially never fall off during the scenario if you're careful about it. The Drifter has an incredible skill ceiling, while also having probably the lowest skill floor in the game. For new players, if you just want to play the melee build, where you play Crushing Weight and Continuous Health, and just bring all the melee and healing cards, guess what? You're going to play this class very effectively. It's incredibly difficult to play that build poorly. If you're struggling to learn new classes and like to be on the front line, that build is incredible. But if you do like versatility, the Drifter, even if you do start to specialize in some builds, can, noting that scenario objectives, just reading at the start, looking at what enemies are placed or whatnot, you can change the whole game altogether. You have the ultimate versatility to decide, hey, these are the things I want to specialize in. Because if you notice that, hey, I need to help this person out, and you were like, I wasn't initially going to be healing, Continuous Health actually has a good top that's a ranged attack. So if you're building for more of a ranged build, you probably were bringing it anyway. Sustained Momentum has a good melee thing built in, but if you need mobility, if you don't want to use the melee attack, the bottom gives you burst mobility. Even then, Crushing Weight, if you don't want to melee, the bottom half gives you a strong heal. So even though you bring like the persistent effects of various things, the other halves give you insane versatility. So you can change the game up to whatever the scenario needs most. So for veteran players, this might be hugely rewarding when you go like, you know what, I don't need X and Y, I need some Z right now, and just be able to on command adapt your character to the situation. If you don't like being on the front line because you do have a good health pool, and you will need that to help your allies out, and if you do like elements, and if you really like to specialize and have special mechanics that are more than controlling how many charges, this might not be the class for you. But if you do like versatility, if you do like high skill ceiling classes that can really reward you, ways you can start to play in like, I don't want to play 2, I want to play 3 or 4 persistent effects a scenario, watch as you can become an incredibly powerful character. But it is at a bit of a risk because you might have all those charges fall off and become weak again. But a particularly proficient player might be able to control and keep those in for the whole scenario, and that's amazing. So if that's up your alley, the Drifter's for you. The Quattro Blinkblade. Word of warning, the tempo of this class is harder than you think. Experienced players may love the idea of initiative weaving, but new players might find this confusing. You have time tokens, a mechanic that allows you to go fast or slow. You can start to build up tokens so you can go have several fast turns in a row, and you may eventually run out of time, forcing you to take slow turns when you don't want them to. The cool part is though, the fast cards award high experience, usually high damage and burst mobility, allowing you to take incredible turns that are well ahead of the curve of the other characters. Unfortunately, to get fast turns, you have to take slow turns, and the slow turns are definitely tuned to a different effect. You often will have lower impact or be forced to put conditions on enemies and won't be able to do some of those really powerful attacks that some of the other classes will be doing in every turn. And the problem mostly becomes pacing. You can do so much with this class though. You can go in and out of visibility. You can zip in and out, so you just avoid the enemy's counterattack altogether. You can break through shields, apply wound, and sometimes you just do big multi-attacks. It's a lot. The Nova turns for this are huge, and the ceiling for play is incredible. The tempo of fast-slow is not like other classes, where other classes you can have several fast turns in a row and you can just go early. This is built into it that you have a resource that will prevent you from going quickly certain turns. Like the earliest you can go on slow turns is 31 with the fastest card in the game. And even then, 31 is not even considered that fast by most other classes. You can't necessarily build up a giant amount of fast turns in a row, not naturally, because as you take slow turns, you can only generate 2 tokens that way, and you have to burn losses or have other special effects just to get the tokens above 2. So without burning those special cards, you're limited to just 2 fast turns in a row. That doesn't mean the class is bad. As a matter of fact, I've seen some incredible effects from players on this class, and it's amazing. But on the other hand though, it does require a bit of experience. So if you're a new player, I would caution you to maybe consider another class. This one definitely is a bit of a challenge. But if you do like that challenge, if you are a player who's like, you know what, I'm gonna try this. This class is more than rewarding for players that want to figure out the puzzle that is the Blinkblade. The Harrower Geminate. 2 hands, 2 miniatures, 3 elements, and more losses than any other class. The Geminate does have a lot going on, but despite all the form swapping and elemental reliance, it's actually really not that bad. You have little ability to generate elements outside of your lost cards, so you'll either have to steal the elements from other characters, and you do have that ability, or you'll have to burn losses to generate the elements you need for your attacks. You do also have to deal with 2 hands, 7 each, and you have the cards that tell you to switch to certain forms. And you can't say, oh, I want to play this card, but I don't want to switch forms. If you play a card that has that effect, you have to switch forms if it's printed on it. It's mandatory. You may burn the cards that may make you form swap and may put yourself into unfortunate situations. Fortunately, with a lot of cards to burn, that shouldn't happen too often, and ultimately, the class is pretty basic. You have a ranged form and a melee form, and you have access to crowd control that some classes don't otherwise have. And in some cases, it does require you to put negative statuses on yourself, but the class has more than enough ways to get out of those. And although I did say you do need elements and usually you can't generate those naturally on your own, you do have some persistent effects that grant you the elements that you want. As long as another element exists, you can turn it to a more desirable element every time you end your turn if you have one of those cards in play. Some people just like pacing their class though. They don't like burning losses, and the Geminate might be a bit of a turnoff there because if you're loss averse, this class is not going to feel good for you because you will need to burn losses and you'll need to burn them often. And sometimes seeing that 7 go down to 6 and 5 real fast makes people go like, oh no, 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 I'm going to burn out. And don't worry, you have a whole nother hand to work through. And learning the tempo of that can sometimes be a bit much, especially as you're trying to balance half the elements on the board while bouncing between 2 hands. It's not really that bad in theory because most of the time, as long as if you catch yourself out of position, long rest allows you to recover everything and exit that long rest out of the form that you want. So there's always an escape button if you find yourself in unfortunate situations. But it does require you to long rest, and you might not want to long rest in every situation. If you're not into the nuance of managing 2 hands, 3 elements, and potentially putting negative conditions on yourself, the other mercenaries might be a better fit for you. But if you like a mercenary that can adapt on the fly to various situations and be unafraid of those burst turns where you can just burn 1 or 2 losses in the same turn and love putting negative conditions on enemies, the Geminate is the starter for you. The Valrat Deathwalker! Fresh out of Hot Topic, this edgy emo mercenary is ready to make the shadows of her fallen foes rise up and tear their former friends apart. Yikes. Call to the Abyss is pretty easy to understand. As long as you attack an enemy, if you kill them, you get a shadow immediately. If you didn't kill them with that attack, just let your friends or kill it in a later turn and you still get that shadow. You could only have 1 enemy tagged in this way, but you can have as many as 5 shadows in the scenario at a time. Shadows are like a resource, but they just stay on the ground rather than you accumulate them. And based off where they are, you can use cool, powerful effects. If you're like, well, I don't like the spot they're in, don't worry, you can move your shadows around, and sometimes in large bursts. Even then, your non-lost shadow moving cards at level 1 says move a shadow up to 5. So you've got a lot of ability to, if a shadow's out of position, you can put it where you want. But a lot of times you'll have to spend these shadows for cool effects. Sometimes you're going to amp up the damage, pierce, and range of an attack. Sometimes you're going to blow a shadow up and do 1 big punch. Other times you're going to blow a shadow up and hit everything around it. Other times you're going to want to stand in a shadow and just take powerful effects because you're in it, and maybe you can turn one of the shadows into a cute little shadow beast. Aww, see how adorable he is? Rawr. I do love the melee build of the Deathwalker, being able to stand in shadows and do powerful damage while just surrounding yourself with large volumes of shadows. That one's always pretty fun to me, but unfortunately it's not the easiest to play. You have the low health pool, so if you do want to get into melee, that's a problem. But if you don't like that, or if you get into melee and go, oh no, I'm gonna put myself out of position, don't worry. You actually start the game with 2 teleports, which is incredible. And you are reliant on those shadows, so sometimes if you're like, oh, I didn't kill it, I'll have my friend finish him up, and then they draw a null, you might be low on resources just because of random draws, and although that can be controlled a little bit, sometimes the way the cards flip can just potentially hurt your resource generation, and some people just don't like that. Although you are semi-reliant on dark, it does add quite a bit, usually improving the damage, range, and even tossing out curses to enemies, which can be huge because you can often give enemies disadvantage, and if you force them to draw 2 cards, they're more likely to draw the curse and not damage you at all, and you really can't afford to take too many hits. So if you want a glass cannon that can punish enemies and use resources that are on the board and position them to potentially unlimited range, this class is for you. But if you want something more durable and more capable of supporting your friends, there are better options. Boneshaper, yeah! So here we have the next big summoning class. Huge hand size of 12, non-lost summons and loads of negative conditions, poison and curses for days. She does a lot. Curses are incredibly powerful, especially in high volume, but her biggest thing is she can summon decrepit skeletons. There are several cards in this class that are just a non-lost health 3 move to attack 2 skeleton. They give you experience every time you summon one too, so even though they're non-lost, they go to your discard pile, you'll be able to summon them again. Unfortunately, Decrepit Skeletons and several other cards damage you as you play them, and you do have the low health pool. Although you have several self-heals, the Boneshaper does suffer from the fact that she's using these a lot, so she does not want to get caught out of position because she can't afford to suffer too many hits because she's usually going to start losing cards very quickly because chances are she's probably hurt, and If she's out of position, probably the summon died as well. Suffering wrong hits at the wrong time can cost you dearly. Additionally, you might have several low effort turns from just trying to set up the summons that you want to have in play, and it may take a little bit of time to get that rolling, and some people just aren't into that. The summons, trying to figure out how monster movement works while juggling two elements, damaging yourself and healing yourself, can sometimes be a bit much. If you just understand the basic monster mechanics, try to go late, let the things go in late, and just initiative weave to help get more turns before your skeletons die. And not only that, but they can take hits. So sometimes your allies will thank you that you have skeletons starting to run ahead, because that means hits going against your skeletons means hits that are not going on your party, which is almost basically like healing your friends. Additionally, this isn't just healing your friends, this is healing your friends with an attack 2 thing every turn that's going to be clawing them as they eventually return to a pile of bones. And you don't just have skeletons, you have the ability to strengthen and heal your allies. You have the ability to poison enemies to make your allies more effective at bringing them down. And you can even grant attacks to not just your skeletons, but to some of your friends, which is particularly effective if you have a drifter buddy. And the cool part is, there's a breadth of playstyles. If you want to specialize more on curses, you should do that. And there is a viable build that starts very early that rewards you if you can get enemies to draw more curses. However, you still might become frustrated on relying on monster behavior, and maybe you haven't gotten the water badge to control all your Pokemon, and that could potentially be less fun. If you want to unleash a horde of undead, stack the deck with curses, and take several actions every turn from having a legion of undead at your command, the Boneshaper is the winner. They all have myriads of strengths and weaknesses, and a breadth of playstyles, so did that help? They're all really pretty cool, aren't they? So tell us, which one are you playing? If you enjoy talking about Gloomhaven and whatnot, consider joining the Rage Badger Discord, where it certainly isn't shitposting 90% of the time. Big thanks to my patrons. I know I say this every video, but it's just really wonderful to have you around. If I can borrow you for just a moment longer, if you're considering being charitable this holiday season and donating to the Salvation Army, consider possibly donating to a different organization. Please reconsider supporting them. There's better places you can put your money than an organization that is attempting to strip away the rights of the LGBT community. Instead, consider supporting organizations such as Trans Lifeline, the Trevor Project, or SafeLine. They're actually doing good in the world and shaping the world to make it a better place. You can have your moment back now. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for watching.